Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a fascinating and urgent concept from our sources called the Sovereign Pilot Manifesto. We're going to explore what they term liturgies of resistance against the creeping centralization of our modern tech landscape. And we're really going to dig into the question of who actually holds authority over your digital reality.
So ask yourself this: who truly controls the switchboard on your desk right now? The texts we're looking at trace a pretty stark warning about the massive, rapid centralization of cloud computing. It really forces us to figure out if we're actually piloting our machines or if we've just been quietly downgraded to digital tenants, merely renting our right to think from some invisible tech monarch.
To understand how we got here, the sources map out something they call the 1689 breach. This draws a direct historical line from the 1648 Treaty of Westphalia and the 1689 Orange Pledge, both of which were agreements specifically designed to keep absolute royal power in check, right up to what they're predicting as the impending 2026 cloud enclosure. The struggle against monopolized authority is basically repeating itself, but this time around the battlefield isn't a medieval castle, it's raw silicon and massive data centers.
The authors of these texts give this modern threat a name: agentic kingship. And honestly, it's a compelling way to frame it. They aren't looking at the 21st century cloud monopoly as technological progress, but rather as a sociological regression. It's a walled garden model that places a massive, completely opaque machine directly between you and your actions. It strips away your local execution and traps you in this foggy, automated miasma where you literally no longer control the underlying logic. So, according to the manifesto, we're staring down two entirely different futures. On one hand, you've got the royalist cloud. Think of this as an enclosed, top-heavy industrial pipe that just constantly vacuums your data up into a centralized tank, leaving you caged as a digital tenant. On the other hand, we have the forest topology. This is a decentralized, constituent-owned model that aggressively pushes concrete execution way out to the extreme edges of the network. Out there in the forest, you are a sovereign pilot.
Now, this brings us to a really critical and frankly alarming concept from the reading called agentic tort. This is the inescapable legal and moral liability that you end up taking on when probabilistic AI inevitably fails. The sources issue a stark warning against this creeping apostasy in our tech culture. We are seeing a deeply problematic trend of outsourcing our moral and practical discernment to opaque algorithms. Think about it. When those algorithms hallucinate a fake legal document or crash a self-driving car, the centralized kings up in the cloud don't take the blame. You do.
Because here's the catch. If you're leaning on unpredictable algorithms to do the heavy lifting of your thinking, you completely lose your true authorship. The texts argue that big tech companies are actively using human operators as a moral crumple zone. You know how a car has a physical crumple zone to absorb the impact of a crash? Well, you are positioned there to absorb the legal and societal impact when the machine fails. You really have to ask yourself, are you commanding the system, or are you just shielding the cloud landlords from liability?
To fight this, the manifesto insists we have to stop relying on what it calls the FPU gambler. These are floating point units that are essentially blindly guessing at answers in the dark and just hoping they get close enough. It's lossy approximation. Instead, we have to hand control back to the ALU surveyor, the arithmetic logic unit. The ALU deals entirely in strict, globally accountable, deterministic truth on local hardware. It replaces all that blurry fog of guessing with perfect hardware provenance. Exact math.
Getting back to that exactness means we need to drastically rethink how we interact with our computers. The sources suggest engaging in tech fasting, shedding those bloated, fragile graphical systems that, let's be honest, kind of reduce us to mere animals pushing colorful levers for a cheap dopamine reward. There's a powerful quote from the text that points this out perfectly. We are trading the profound nuance of human language for the lazy simplicity of a shiny button.
It really highlights the stark contrast between heavy, invasive graphical user interfaces, or GUIs, and the pure, unadulterated command line interface. GUIs are notoriously fragile. They rely on messy screen scraping and visual mistranslations, and they constantly break. But pure text on a command line? That is the universal interface. It's incredibly lightweight, it completely bypasses all that visual bloat, and it generates 100% exact text logs. It lets you communicate with the machine precisely at the speed of thought.
And by stepping onto this semiotic bridge of exact text, the texts argue we completely reframe what code actually is. Code isn't just cold math or invisible mechanical gears. Code is operational literature. It's a highly explicit, binding continuation of human authorship where you hold total rhetorical control. Just like a lawyer carefully drafting a flawless, bulletproof contract, you are authoring a binding story that the physical reality of the machine literally has to execute.
Which brings us to the architectural mandate for all of this, a core liturgy of resistance that the authors call leaf node logistics. This strategy explicitly purges the apostasy of that floating top-heavy cloud tree we talked about. Instead, it aggressively pushes concrete execution and state management as far out to the extreme edges of the network as possible, out to the leaves. This is exactly how you bypass legacy gatekeepers and reclaim your power, by pushing execution straight to your local desk.
So how do you actually implement this? The sources map out a strict three-step protocol named chopsticks engineering. It uses elegant, lightweight maneuvers to break free. Step 1 is simple but crucial. Secure the physical substrate, meaning you actually own the hardware sitting on your desk. Step 2, publish your unalterable intent. You anchor your commands in a mathematically perfect, tamper-proof chronological text record, like a LIFO JSON. And step 3, execute locally, never asking a centralized tech monarch for permission.
The manifesto uses a brilliant historical parallel to help us visualize this unalterable digital intent. Imagine Paul Revere's specific written account. Picture it as a cream-colored text panel, permanently mounted to a solid red brick wall. The text represents your digital protocol, your human intent. The red brick? That's the substrate, your physical local hardware. Without that solid red brick holding it up, the text is completely meaningless. Your digital intent absolutely must be inextricably married to your local physical hardware.
When you strictly marry your digital code to your local hardware like that, you achieve a philosophical concept called haeseity. It's a fancy word, but it basically just means the absolute, undeniable thisness of a physical event, like a specific man on a specific horse at exactly 10 p.m. It demands the absolute necessity of maintaining a local, unmediated physical reality. It proves your actions are undeniable physical events driven by human effort rather than just cloudy, probabilistic approximations lost in the cloud. Just think about this quote from the text for a second. You are quite literally tricking rocks into thinking using lightning and text. I mean, wow. The manifesto urges us to reject any sort of theology of the machine. AI is not a god. It is a rigid, deterministic scripter. The magic is never in the silicon itself. It's entirely in the manual sweat of the brow from the human pilot who is actively orchestrating that lightning. You are the theological steward of the hardware. So as this great cloud enclosure tries to wall off our digital reality and liquidate our true authorship, the choice is ultimately up to you. The tools are sitting right there on your command line. Are you going to passively rent your thoughts from an invisible tech monarch and just act as their moral crumple zone? Or will you secure your local physical reality, grab that agentic typewriter, and ride out as the sovereign pilot? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the architecture around you.